Hello and welcome. Today we have with us Dr. Ishita Tiwary. She is an assistant professor and Canada Research Chair at the Concordia University, Canada. Her recent book, Video Cultures in India, The Analog Era, narrates the history of video technology in India since its introduction in the 1980s. She works on video cultures, video platforms, media infrastructures, migration, and informal media practices. In this episode, we are going to speak broadly about technology and its relationship with religion. Welcome, Ishita.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and to speak about this topic. And I'm really excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. So before we go into the specific of conversation, can you just broadly lay out this terrain called technology and religion, just in very brief, just to give a context?
It's a very broad context. Generally, when we think about technology and religion, the key thing that comes is the idea of mediation. That technology, whether it's like audio technology or video technology or digital technologies, when religion comes into being, it becomes this mediating factor in trying to put this message across as to whether it's a cult or whether it's a religion towards people. It creates that kind of like relationship between the guru and the disciple per se. And so I think that mediation becomes in any work on like religion and media, which is less so in media studies, but quite a lot in anthropology. Mediation has been a chief kind of theoretical construct to talk about this. And it still is like the dominant mode of thinking as well, because media in itself is understood as like mediating. So it is used, wordplay, it's used in various ways. So that's generally what we think about when we think about technology and media. Of course, depending on what medium we're talking about, what kind of relationship we're talking about, it's like fleshed out much more concretely.
So the next question that comes at, as you said, there is a long history of relationship between technology and religion or communalism, especially when we think of mediation. Every time whether we think of print technology in 19th century or audio cassette culture in 80s or television before that and internet and then the digital media, every time there's what is happening is new. Of course it's new, but there's always this question of a sense of like something extraordinarily new. I mean, of course, digital medium is different, but at the end of the day, it is doing kind of the similar thing, and there is definitely a qualitative and quantitative changes in that. So, how do we, as a general audience, how do we understand that? That like because the form change and it seems like it's something totally new as a concept happening, which is kind of not true.
So my work essentially on this topic evolves on 80s audio and video culture, but it also looks at long afterlives. And if we think about a qualitative or quantitative difference, it is about circulation. So to expand upon that, how does circulation work? First, we had pamphlets, as you said. We had pamphlets, and pamphlets are doing the work of communicating to people. Pamphlets also need you to be literate. So it's also going to certain kind of audience. Then you have audio cassettes that come in the 80s. The 80s is an interesting moment, and I'll talk specifically about India here. 80s and 90s is an interesting moment because post 80s India starts starts making a move towards neoliberalism. It's also the time when the Khalistani separatist movement happened and Indira Gandhi was assassinated. It's also the time when the Mandal Masjid movement was taking place. So we have these thoughts of social, political, cultural confluence, and comes in audio and video technologies as well, as the site experiment also at this time. Important to note is that initially, especially with video technology, government thought it's going to be used for a pedagogical or developmental agenda like DD. But then video actually doesn't follow that track and it becomes a grey market object. And we get to know this possibility simultaneously with the audio cassette and the video cassette towards like the end 80s, early 90s when the BJP starts mobilizing around the Mandal Masjid issue. So there was this one kind of, one of the main leaders was Sadhvi Rathamra, and she actually gave a very hateful speech. Matter went to court. Court said this cassette will not get distributed. and they actually start making illegal contraband cassettes to circulate, right? Now they want to circulate this. If it's illegal, it's in the grey market, how are you going to keep track of it? And when somebody, it's also a human tendency. If you say, no, I'll now seek it out even more. There's more curiosity.
Right.
So the audio cassette starts circulating. Already people who want to listen can listen to it. Similarly with video, the Babri Masjid demolition, with the mobilization that led to Babri Masjid demolition was also video. What they would do is that they would have something called video raths. They were just basically like the Rath Yatra, they'll be carrying raths, but the rath will have a television set. And then they'll have videos of the people's speeches or kind of propaganda, etc. And they will go to every city or to village with these video raths to get mobilize support for the demolition. And again we see, but then who has access to cassette player? Who has access to video cassette players? As we say, raths were away. But again, the circulation of it is again limited to those places where it's accessible infrastructurally for these audio cassettes and video cassettes to be broadcasted. Or you have the private means to own this much, that to actually own a private audio record, a music system or a video cassette recorder, or the neighborhood screenings which used to happen, which most famously happened when Indira Gandhi was facing opposition and Bobby was screened in all these neighborhoods in Delhi to create so that people don't go to the opposition. So media has always been used that way. But again, who is it reaching to? Again, of course, the crowd has expanded from the pamphlet era to audios and videos. With digital, it's rapid, right? It's immediately something happened, it can be circulated in any way you watch. You just need a mobile phone, you just need to shoot something or record something and put it online. Also, even though India is not, the penetration of internet is not that wide as it is in other Western countries, but that's still a significant number of people who is it reaching to. And remember, for most Indians, when they first encountered the internet, for them internet was Facebook, and now it's become WhatsApp. So for them, the information comes from Facebook and WhatsApp. It was also TikTok, but TikTok got banned because of China. So any video or audio that goes there goes to these networks. Simultaneously in real time, you can actually start the groundwork for either its propaganda or spreading your message or having a cult or just kind of, reaching out to your flock as per se. So this is just what had it's changed. It's changed the duration, temporality, that it's become immediate as opposed to a lag that we see in pamphlets, audio cassettes and video cassettes. Also the number of people that it's being reached. And I think here, even if we think about technological development, the fact that when Jio came to the market and gave dirt cheap prices for internet plans, so many people could afford to have a mobile phone. Everybody has a mobile phone right now. For them, the mobile phone is the internet, not the laptop or the PC. And so if that's the internet, where do you get your information from? It's WhatsApp, which is so many people much more smarter than me and has done much more rigorous work than me have kind of pointed it out towards it. But again, I think a lot of that work is not being done from media studies, which is my field. It's mostly coming from anthropology, maybe from social science as well. There's been some work done also in Brazil about it, because Brazil, after India, also has a big WhatsApp kind of economy, and that's circulating as well. And I think in global South countries, WhatsApp is seen as social media and number one, source of fake news. But who are I think it's also a transition towards not knowledge as not about being rooted in facts, but how about people feel, emotion. Because media, when you see media, you're moved, right? It's a different thing, just hearing dry facts, and a different thing seeing a video that's compellingly made for you to emphasize this is the truth. So I think that kind of changes with mediation. This changes with the coming of digital. So we see this kind of different shifts in terms of circulation as technology advances more.
Yeah. So I'm very tempted to ask another question on that. You spoke about contraband, which is interesting, because then there's a contraband, and what the initially government thought in 70s and 80s to use this video as a pedagogical and developmental medium. But we also see in 80s and 90s also the broadcast of, let's say, something called Mahabharata and Ramayana, which is again from the state owned. So it is official in a sense. But the official and the contraband, they're kind of working somewhere together. So state is a kind of banning something, but then the kind of what is official it is proposing or giving people, they are not the same thing, but they're going in the similar kind of direction. That religiosity, what bring them together. That religiosity, when it convert into communalism.
And I think with Mahabharata and Ramayana, so thank you for kind of pointing it out. I forgot about it. Ramayana and Mahabharata were important factors along with the contraband audio cassettes and video cassettes to create this sense of religiosity, majority being hurt, minority rights trumping majority rights, this idea of a glorious past culture, and the fact that, this needs to be protected at all costs, our civilization was gone. So they did work together. The TV serials, the kind of video and audio mobilization, and let's not forget that Ramayana and Mahabharata re-aired again during COVID. And COVID crisis followed immediately after there was this massive anti-CA protest in the country. And they were getting huge kind of mobilization, which is not only from people who you would expect to do politics, but also from a larger sense of populace, which was really interesting about that movement. The fact that it was being led by Muslim women. And then immediately you had COVID, and it's announced that Ramayana and Mahabharata will re-air again. Along with the fact that, we do see right-wing indulging in their propaganda via Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc. So you can see this kind of parallels coming together, that it is used as a certain way to kind of create sentiment or consensus. But media definitely does that, play that role in carrying that message forward, in mediating that message.
So what we can say in a very popular chronological way, that Gita Press comes in a print, and then the official, that B.R. Chopra's, and then this contraband. Everything is actually kind of working towards creating a ground. And we can call them, some of them are religious and then some become communal, but they are pushing narrative towards a particular, creating a ground for that. That intervention or space of religion in a public space from outside.
I would hesitate to have such a broad sweeping reading, because I think that takes away any kind of space of resistance of resistance of this narrative, of the existence of plurality of narratives. This kind of makes us understand through a simple reading would be that, then in every context in the world, when both contraband media and mass media come together and state media come together to push a certain idea of religiosity, and only that narrative exists and others don't. So I think that we need to be a bit cautious about. Yes, this happens, but that doesn't mean that also remember, with audio, video technology, analog video technology, now in digital, a lot of people, because if it is relatively cheaper than film technology, more portable, more lightweight, anybody can be a content creator. And I'm saying that with air quotes, content creator, because I'm skeptical about the word of content creator. Then you can have multiplicity of narratives existing together. On one hand, if you do have a state narrative, it is possible, and it's not possible, we know it through history, that there's always been counter narratives. So that there'll always be a counter narrative when you have these multiple technologies existing. But also I think thinking about if you're just looking at India, looking at the scale and diversity of the country, you can't really control everybody and how they think. There will be ways that people will kind of counter that message. Maybe perhaps it might not reach that circulation like the state would, because, they don't have that kind of apparatus or machinery to reach out to many people. But there's also the beauty of digital being that, if you're popular, many people, irrespective of national boundaries, will be able to consume that content.
Thank you for pointing out. I think this is a very sweeping statement. But again, I think then there is when I now think of on a comment, that there is a whole culture of film clubs, screenings, and a lot of these actually news were also circulated through audio. And I think it's little later, but I think Anand Patwardhan's films also, they were used to be mass screened, or a lot of films. So yeah, I think there is definitely that chunk that there is always a counter narrative. But yeah, again, the question comes to the circulation, which is a big difference. So now, to particular context to the whole question of music and hate, media, how the initiative that happened in Bikaner, how the state is using in a very progressive manner the use of a traditional music genre like Kabir, which says that, because what happened in 90s, that one of the most important narrative came out was that, the Western kind of secularism failed. in Indian state. So even for a secularism, we have to go back to our roots, and the roots were found in Kabir. So we see a lot of bands and even political groups actually employing Kabirs and a lot of these syncretic tradition poetry. So 30 years later, when we see again use of this poetry to counter religious hate, and what I saw in my very limited conversation with this stakeholder, it is not necessarily working, because for us and for a lot of people, Kabir could be a face of a secularism or someone who is basically iconoclast. But a lot of people, Kabir is actually a religious figure. And so what if we see Kabir as someone who is countering the communalism, it is not necessarily, the message is not going down. So it's very tricky. So my question would be, is it advisable for any state apparatus like police, and India is a constitutionally secular democracy, to even go into this terrain of using religious kind of symbol or tradition to kind of counter a hate that is actually embedded in a religious life?
It is, I think this question has lots of components, so I'll go one by one, and I don't know if I'll be able to satisfactorily answer that question, because I think it's a question all of us kind of struggle with on a day-to-day basis. Number one, I don't think we ever had Western secularism. I think the Indian idea of secularism is actually far more progressive and radical than Western idea of secularism. The Western idea of secularism means that there is no, and which really comes from the French word of licit, is that no religious symbol is allowed in public. Your religious life cannot be demonstrated in public. While the Indian version of secularism is, it's all right if you display religiosity in public. It's all right if you have different personal boards governing your religion. We should all coexist together. That's more radical. We are not kind of controlling other people. It's actually, when we think about what's at stake with current India, it's the secularism. This progressive version of secularism is at stake, which is trying to be upended by this Hindutva government. Talking about getting religious, the state using religion. Two things here. Whenever you make anything in media, whether it's an audio recording or a video recording or a film or an OTT show, etc., you make it with a certain intention. But at the end of the day, the audience decides how to read it. Your intention might be completely different, but the audience might treat and take something else from it. It's completely fine. So there are some people who might be taking the syncretic sense, as you've mentioned, in these recordings of Kabir and the secular kind of mindset, where some others are saying, oh, we see it as a religion thing. Now, I necessarily don't think it's a bad thing if they're taking it as a religious thing. We are a very religious country. Religion underpins, in some ways, our everyday life. It dictates people's everyday life. I don't think we should have a problem with people practicing the religion, whatever that be, as long as it doesn't dwell into hatred. Now, if people are taking the message from Kabir in a religious way, but not in a hateful way, it is fine if it's teaching them how to be tolerant. Also, I think there needs to be a distinction being made within the context in India between Hinduism and Hindutva. Hindutva is a fundamentalist idea of seeing Hinduism as kind of very similar to monotheistic religion, while Hinduism in itself is very plural, and they kind of appropriate everything. Buddha also becomes a Hindu god. Somewhere Nanak Sahib also becomes. Isai is also there. Somewhere they'll mix and match and make a kish out of all of it, which is fine. This is how it's the nature of a pluralistic religion, had many kind of debates within it. I don't think there's anything wrong that if it's seen as a religious thing, as long as it teaches you to be tolerant towards to respect other people's faith. Of course, then there is reason to worry if they read Kabir in a religious manner and don't take the tolerance aspect of it or the respecting other faiths aspect of it. That means there's something wrong in the way the message has been made for the audiences. It's okay if you take it religiously or not religiously. That is not the point. I think the larger stake is, can we respect other people? Can we be more equitable? Can we have tolerance? Can we coexist together peacefully? That should be the message, irrespective of what you practice. So I think that's kind of my complex response to your question.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because the podcast is also geared because we are studying about impact, and I think maybe it's if in case you have something to add to it, if it is to be listened by policymakers or let's say the police department who really want to change things in a way, how can we work toward this reception, how people receive it, what are the strategic changes that in messaging we could kind of, as a like media scholar?
I mean, like, I'm a media scholar, but I also trained in filmmaking. And one thing I can say is I cannot control reception. Because reception is coded in so many ways that you would not understand. What is a media literacy? How much of media are you exposed to? How are you ideologically raised up in your family? What is your societal kind of like culture around you? How do people interact and talk about these issues on an everyday basis? All of this come together to influence the way you read the content, right? So how can we, like somebody who's making, the producer at the end of the day can only be honest and authentic to what they're making and make it in the right way possible. But reception we cannot control. Like it's totally up to, like, as I said, multiple factors where they'll see like what the reception is like. For instance, let's think of an example. Like when the Delhi riots happened, for instance, and there were so many WhatsApp videos circulating. One would think that it is the right answer is to be horrified by these images. Also, there are lots of, I don't know if you remember, there's a very famous WhatsApp video of the Delhi riots where a person climbs up the mosque and puts up the saffron flag, which is complete parallel to what happened in Babri Masjid. It's like uncanny. You all see the differences. Perhaps there are people who will see it as horrifying and history repeating itself and which track are we going to? But somebody who's proselytized, who is like a Hindutva, buys into Hindutva ideology, for them, it would just reinforce the narrative that this is a very good thing. We have finally shown them their place. So it really depends on so many factors. Two people can read the image very differently. So I don't think reception can be kind of, we can't manage reception or perception or sentiment. But what we certainly can do if you want to have this reception in the right manner is to then work on the ground and to kind of reach out to people and on a ground level and have a discussion with them, which is very hard. This is a lot of hard work. And I don't know how that will be done.
Yeah. So now there are two aspects of this whole. So the music festival Rajasthan Kabir Yatra under this project Tana Mana happened, and there are always varied response how people receive, and with best of my capacity I cannot speak to everyone. So of course there's a sample size. Given that it didn't necessarily work in a positive manner with even some of the organizer and audience, but there are other positive responses as well. Now we see this content in two ways. One, the live event and the people who participated in it. The second, it's digital lives. Like what people in other places would look at it as a very good example. Like as an audience, again, you spoke about circulation and media literacy. Is there something else that we could add to this? Just if there is a binary between these, reception in live and then media types.
I think they are linked, and if I'll be so shameless to plug my work in. My research was actually on Osho videos in the 80s and 90s. And Osho actually, all his audio cassettes and video cassettes which were circulated of his pravachans, they were live recordings. He would give these pravachans live. So it first started like when he was in India, he used to mainly speak in Hindi, and like he had Jain benefactors and used to go to their houses. And one of his most famous pravachan was on the Bhagavad Gita. That's also one of the most popular of pravachans, which also got a lot of followers for him. He very cannily realized how important media would be to sustenance of his cult. A lot of people hearing those people who are live are already his followers. Plus, in live, there's an aura. You are in the presence of your guru. The guru is kind of bestowing you with his knowledge. And in India, we think about being with guru as an act of darshan, right? We are looking at him, he's reciprocating the gaze back, we are getting some divinity out of that reciprocal relationship. So there's this aura of that life experience of just being in that, you feel special, you feel that you've been touched by this person's holy presence. The recordings kind of maintain that aura, that the voice becomes. And like when you're in video, and if you see in video, the framing, right? The frame is like from a mid shot, which is from their torso to their head. So it's just like you are so focused on their face, how they're reacting, how they're using their hands. It's like you see there's an immediate response towards them. And so those who don't have the kind of privilege to see their guru in person, which could be many ways why they can't do it, they can cultivate that relationship of seeing recordings, live recordings. So also this happens is like one is immediacy, the relation of immediacy. But with the recording, you can go back to it again and again. It's used as a way to like kind of perpetuate the aura, to circulate that aura to a larger base. It's also used as a way for people to come and join any kind of movement that there is. So it's the same thing with Astha TV and also Ramdev TV. Like with Ramdev, you have these live like yoga sessions, but they're being broadcasted, and you see them as well. So it's doing both that work. Like in fact, like their recordings of like live broadcast is very important, because that's how you actually reach out to people. That's how you kind of maintain this. Even this day, when I was doing my fieldwork for the Osho ashram, their main meditation that takes place in the hall, when they close down the entire ashram, you have his video recording still on. They simulate this environment that he's there with you live, even though he's passed away. And it's a recording used beforehand. And there'll be a pravachan there. So I think there is a relationship. They're not necessarily separate from each other when we think about media and religion. I think they both work together in different ways, and in different configurations of space and time. But I think it has a lot to do with creation of maintenance of aura, while also kind of like having a proselytizing function.
Yeah. So in this question, I think one point which might give us a certain idea of, because you can't control the reception, but of course the kind of content that you produce, that is in, and digital or audio video content is something which is very expensive, like in that scale if we imagine. So, and there's a longer scholarly work on whole 19th century onwards, the whole building of Hindu nationalism. And when it comes to money, who funded these kind of projects? And there's a constant reference in scholarly work comes to the Vaishnavite mercantile class. So, of course, the medium anyone can create it, but the money is again very important. Is there something that you can speak about money in whole production, whether if it's under state control, the kind of content the state produce or the private industry produce, or then how, because what they will, if industry is producing, one, they can direct the public sentiment to a particular direction. The second, they say, oh, this might be a popular content right now to produce.
I'll say only through Osho's example and perhaps examples that I've studied on, because I don't want to make speculations of something I don't know.
Sure.
All these gurus need financial backing for sustenance. So in Osho's example, when he first started out, he had Jain benefactors. And then as his international reputation grew, there was a Greek shipping heiress who became his disciple, and the Osho ashram that we see in Pune, she bought that land in Koregaon, gifted it to him. There was a Learjet heiress who was one of his patrons, and she gifted him a private airline of his own. Because they had other rich patrons, they could go to Portland and buy their entire ranch and create Rajneesh in a different city only in itself in Portland. So it can't be without money. Or presently with Art of Living in Sadhguru, they also have very rich benefactors. They're very public rich benefactors who come to them. We know they must be giving them money, because how is it possible that they're coming and they're giving interviews and not giving money to them? So there's always been patrons involved when it comes to these cults. And I'm sure there are many complex reasons of why they're attracted towards it. And I think there's studies being done about that, one which I cannot speak to. But of course, there is this guy. I mean, yes, there is one thing that you want to manage public affect, you want to manage public sentiments. But on the other, I think we should not underestimate that a lot of people want a spiritual dimension to their lives. And when they want a spiritual dimensions to their life, they will find themselves attracted towards, it could be a guru, it could be some kind of reading, it could be something that gives that spirituality, meditation, for tech bros, it's ayahuasca. So they have different kind of ways of reaching out to spirituality. So I think that also compounds this kind of relationship between capital and religion. And that capital is obviously used by the gurus to put their perpetuate their aura. And so I think that it's a very important point that money is definitely involved. Patrons are definitely involved, and it's a long-standing kind of tradition.
Yeah, I think we think of reception. I think it's interesting again, we think of, you shared about example Ramayana and Mahabharata being screened during the COVID time. It's a crisis time. One would want to also think of it as, okay, this is, some people are like far away, from each other, there they can't step out, and so this is something to calm them down, because religion and spirituality kind of might give them a kind of sense of faith when the faith is not immediately visible. So of course there are reading, but maybe because of the kind of difficult times that we are living in, or the particular this podcast is dealing with, it might be really difficult to read them that way. So the one of the thing that I want to ask, because we are talking about circulation in the digital space, like whole idea of how algorithm, like what kind of content that you see come. I mean, there are so many facets of it, like my own personal consumption, what is being promoted on a kind of demography I belong to. There's so much of it that it's kind of, if you're not initiated, like as you said, you're not media literate, you would be fed a lot of content in a certain way. So, and I don't know what kind of policy, censorship or kind of regulation could, what worked in 19 and 1880s or 2000s, what are the ways that this kind of content can be kind of regulated and without being censored? I don't know. Is this even a valid question to ask? Like, how, in terms of literacy or control, like, because then anyone can upload anything and it goes off. And we have seen in a lot of this conflict in recent past or wild cases of violence, then there are certain videos would be censored and all, but then other will not. Like, so this is, again, it's a democratizing of social media, digital spaces, but then it also comes with its own issue.
I don't know if there's a clear answer to this. Of course, everybody's internet is different based on what content you interact with, what ads you're like looking at. They keep on targeting you with it. So how my Twitter, Instagram feed would look will be very different from your Twitter and Instagram feed. It would be very different from others who don't really know what they're looking for and happily buy into Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, incel culture, or any kind of like, Hindu khatre mein hai narrative, etc. So that's one thing. Regulation, I'm skeptical about regulation because I think just looking at India's, and which has a long history of regulation kind of thing, is that it's always been used by the government to control public response. Since India got independence, the history of regulation has been one to think about infantilizing the Indian populace, that they need to be protected, they need to be cared about. We need to tell them how to think about this. So cinema becomes, because media is such a thing, cinema became that site, video became that site, TV became that site, now OTT has become that site, and OTT is not even a mass medium in this country. But I guess it's being targeted because OTT has international appeal, like international reach. So if there are shows critical of the government and they're being scared internationally, the government would not want that. So I don't think regulation is being used about in ways that let's not see another lynching. Let's not see another kind of violent event against minorities. Legislation is used in the service of to make the government look good, or to make the governments, or to cater to the government's ideologies about what should the populace of a country consume for content and what they should not. How are they to decide? So I think the question about should we regulate so we don't have hate speech is actually kind of self-defeating, because in some ways we are actually being anti-freedom of speech. While the idea should be that everybody should be able to see this kind of content, which is not true, because we know that all these tech companies are beholden to the government. And if they want to operate in a country like India, let's remember also logistically, China has closed down its internet. You can't go, which is the second biggest market after China, India. India's internet penetration is also not that big. That means huge market, even in this, suppose if it's 20%, that 20% is a large number. Knowing that 20% will only go to 100, let's even take that scenario. It's a big amount of numbers for these capitalists. Why would they want to be unfriendly with the government when they have so many people and possibly profits to go after? So they would toe the pro-government line. So I think regulation is not the right kind of answer, because even if we look at the new broadcast bill that's being tabled, it's very dangerous. And the fact that it's kind of implying that there can be no exercise of dissent. So I don't think that we should think about regulation with perspective of to like how to influence reception or how to like influence how people think, because then we are also doing what the government is doing. What's the difference between us and them? So I don't know what's the right way, but regulation definitely is not.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.